In this video, we're going to look at adding deformers to a basic rig so we can start building a character turnaround. So on this rig, it's in its really base form. So we have basic layers. So we have head, hair, we have some face pieces on it. If we look through drawing substitutions, we don't have too much going on there except when we move into, say, the hands. Let's just switch this back so we're not on peg mode, make it faster. So now in drawing subs, we can see I have flipped hands and I also have flipped feet, just to keep it simple while we're working. So if we want to do some basic animation without having to do a lot of deformation, we could just use the flipped versions of it. Ideally with the hands and even the feet, we would have some additional drawings for different views, different hand positions, gestures, etc. But again, this is an instructional model, not really a full production rig, but it is set up with auto patching going on, so we do have some cross patching going on in our different joints. So we have 3-part joints for our hand, lower arm, upper arm. If we look at that, so we're using the cross patching method there, and then we're using that same methodology to create shoulders with an overlay layer for the sleeves, as well as for then cross patching the hips with the legs, so that we are able to have seamless joints happening on our character rig. So again, we don't have a lot of extra features on here, belts and elbows and knee creases and things like that. The face is set up just with single elements for the eyes, so we don't have multiple eye parts broken down. Well, because again, we're just trying to keep this as a straightforward process. So first thing I'm going to do is extend out my rig to my timeline. Now I'm on frame 1 here. What we are going to do next is add deformers into the character rig, and we're going to look at a couple of different ways of automating that, which makes it pretty slick when we're working. So first thing is, if I select a given layer here, what I want to do, I could use my deformer toolbar, go into my tool properties, create an envelope deformer and draw all the way around. But one thing that we can do to try and speed this up is we have the ability to create an envelope automatically. So if I choose create envelope, and now we can zoom into that particular layer that I'm working with, we have options. Now it's remembering the last thing I added. I added 10 points to it, but by default it starts at 4 and then this is at 0. So the different settings you can play with, you can adjust as you try and figure out how you want it to work. So if I say create envelope here, we'll see that it now created an envelope, and the envelope lines are inside my stroke, and what I really want is I want it to be at the outside edge of the stroke. So to accomplish that, first we'll undo, and now if I expand this out and now say create envelope, we'll see that it expanded out. So my current stroke is 8 pixel stroke, and it seems 5 gives me a decent number. Now when we look here, we can see it gave us different handles to work with. So if I were to now animate this element, first I'll want to use the rigging tool and fine-tune the placement, but you can see it got pretty darn close as it lined these up. I'm just going to pull these out so we're right on the edges. That does give us a little better deformation than if these lines are on the inside. Now if I go back to my transform tool and click on any individual point, you'll see how we're able to work with this. Now this is a single layer sleeve, it doesn't have a back, so I can't pull this up and curve it and reveal the back edge on it, so it's not a 2-part sleeve. Again, this is a base character, it's not a complex character. Now if you do pull your deform up too much, you can see weird things do start to happen. If we click into our render view, you will see that some of that does disappear. So even when you see things happening inside the WebGL view or OpenGL view, that we can see how that is taking effect. Now, if I've done this, I'm like, okay, what was 0? I want to, and again, we'll see that's too far, so that's not going to work on that particular deformer. But what I can do is I can now select that point and shift clicking this button up here resets that deformation point. So if I select my deformers, now I've turned on my selection mode, control selection mode, so it will select deformers. If I turn that off, I highlight, you'll see it doesn't choose the deformers. So we click that, and that allows me to lasso around the deformers that I may have modified. I can click here to reset them to their original starting position. So that's helpful when you get out and you start animating and your deformer gets really wonked and you don't want to hunt through your layers to find that particular deformer. Find a keyframe where it's not wonked, copy that, go back out, paste it. You can just reset it back to its starting position. That can be a useful technique. So this particular shape, because it's very simple, 4 points and 5. So the 5 is going to be pretty consistent through all of this because I have a consistent line length around everything as I'm working. Now if I click on a different piece of artwork and I choose create envelope, so if we do a 4 point, we can see that it's getting pretty close. Now if I click off, so nothing's selected, or hit escape and go grab the rigging tool, you need to make sure I'm using the rigging tool, not the transform tool, because I'm not trying to animate this yet. And don't want to add a new point. I'm trying to adjust that handle to fit within the curvature of the arm. So there's different rationale. So I'm going to, on the limbs on the left side of the character's body as we look at it, on camera left, I'm going to use 4 deformation points, and on the right side I will use 8. So there's kind of different strategies for how you might want to go about doing it. Now, realistically, what works better is to set these points not up at the corners, but down around from the edges. And when we do that, that makes our job when we're animating just a little bit easier. So that would be my recommendation of how you would want to set those points. So we get that curve happening here. And if I were to turn off the sleeve, you would see that we're pretty close onto the arm. And so that's going to work. So this create envelope, I can just kind of move that over and just leave that up while we go through this process. So now if I select this arm, create envelope, once again, I'm going to pull this point down, pull that over, probably not down that far since it's showing me where that curvature is, and then we pull these handles out to try and affect it. So we adjust the placement of these. The more, if you spend a little bit of time in the beginning doing this, it's going to work better. Now the hand. When I look at the hand here, it's not just a simple kind of shape. It has ins and outs to it. So if I want to put a single deformer on this so I can modify the hand and not just rely on drawing substitutions, I have counted the number of corners, and turns out 10 points gives me what I need. Now when I look at this, they don't land in the right places, so I need to move some of them over. So that particular handle is problematic because we really have to zoom in to be able to grab that extra point. Now as I do this, what works best, well, I'm arranging these points. Those line up where I know they need to be. That point needs to come out. This point needs to go up to the corner. So the first thing I like to do is to get my points in approximate position. Then I start grabbing my handles and adjusting them. So if I pull this point down there, you can see it follows that curve perfectly. Now this is a corner right there, so to create a corner, hold down Alt or Option, and now I can move that handle back and align it. So using, forgot to hold down Alt or Option right there. So using the auto envelope creator can be a really nice time saver because it allows us to get things in place quickly without having to just click and drag all the way around. So if you can make it work, now it's not going to work in all situations, but in a lot of situations it's going to work pretty good. So we'll again go back to 4. So we've got our 2 corner points down there. I'm going to pull this point over to here, and the rationale for doing that is now when we have it set up with the character and I want to reshape this, it makes your job a lot easier when that handle, if you have too many points, when you start trying to adjust a shape, and when we add in the 8 points on the other side of the body, we're going to see the difference when we start trying to modify the body parts and animate with them. So after you create your envelope, the easy, wrong tool, I'm like, I don't want to animate. The easy tool is, hit escape as needed so it's no longer selected. And now this one lined up pretty close. I'm just going to pull that down a little bit more. Alright. Let's move over. Select the lower leg, 4 points. So we can see I want to adjust those 4 points. We're kind of putting 2 points close to one end, 2 points close to the other end, and then start to line up. Now you'll notice as I adjust the curvature, so right now this is a corner point, but if I pull this so it gets in alignment, okay, except on the origin point it doesn't want to do that, but if I were to pull this in alignment, you can see how it snapped and now joined with its compatriot, its sibling right there. But if I can make it work without having that as a corner point, ultimately that's going to be a little bit easier when you are trying to do the deform as part of your animation. Alright, now I'm guessing the foot, if I add a deformer in on the foot, probably will need more than 4, but maybe not. But we need for sure 1 down here, yeah, because we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's just undo that and know that, for this particular one, 5 is going to give us a better range of points. And it doesn't always know where I wanted those points, which is why we have to take control of the situation. So again, hold down Option to adjust that. Move that up on the screen here a little bit easier. Shorten this. Ideally, these handles on your points should be each one should be approximately 1/3 of the segment length. So between 2 points, you have one handle that's 1/3, one handle that's 1/3, and you have 1/3 of your line that's not, in effect, being touched by the handle. That's going to give you the best control when you are working and animating. Now, when we do big curves, we don't always get perfect with that, but that should be the goal that you strive towards as you build this out. All right, so now we have part of the body done. We can go through. Let's choose the hips. 1, 2. I think the hips. Let's see if we can make it work with 6. So we know we'll need 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, let's try 5. So again, the fewer points you have, the happier you're going to be when you are trying to do your deforms. So I'm really going to recommend, well, that lined it up, that shape lent itself to it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This one could be 4 or 5. Let's see if we can do 4. And 4 has lined up almost exactly right on where we want it, so I'll just call that good. Now select the next. So I'm holding down Command or Control to switch from my rigging tool to my select tool, so I can just select the layers. I don't have to keep selecting tools over here in case you're wondering where that was coming from. Okay, the neck is a pretty simple shape, so that works. The head shape, again, 4 should be good for doing that. If we need more subtlety on it, then, because we don't have multiple head shapes, we might want to do the head with a few more points so we can get some curvature as the head is trying to turn and we're doing deforms with it. So maybe go up to 8 on it, because that's going to just give a little more flexibility and subtlety as you adjust the head. The hair is a lot of points. That one is going to require us to hand draw it because the hair is drawn as a single piece, so it really is kind of a nightmare object. So I won't encourage that one. So now clicking over to the other sleeve. So if we create an envelope with 8, we'll see that while it frames it nicely, when it comes time to start animating with it, we're going to find that it might not be as ideal because we really have too many points. So with the 8-point setup, let's zoom in here a little bit. What we're normally going to be aiming for, 1 up here, 1 on either side, 1 on either side. So we have points, the 4 corners, and then middle handles that we're working with. Often when you do this, we end up burying that origin point handle in one of the joints, either the top or bottom. So it's kind of unfortunate that I have to move so many of these parts back around to get the view. This is trying to do this and have it in the position where I want it. It almost would have been faster to hand draw it, because then they would already be following the curves that I am aiming for. But hopefully you can start to see that basic. Now, like, those handles are too long for that segment. So if you have too many points, it doesn't work well, and if your artwork is too complex and you have too few points, that's not going to work either. So everything is always a compromise. You're always trying to find that ideal mix or balance as you are working. So there is my 8 points. I have the origin point in the elbow. Now if we go into the lower arm here with it, I'm just going to use the rigging tool, and we'll just put our first point here, our next point in that direction, next point that direction, over here. If you'll notice, I'm clicking and dragging back to the prior point. That creates that handle, so I can start to follow that. And now we'll go here. Probably should have turned off the prior element, and now when we get to the end, I hold down Alt, and now it gives me, when I'm over that origin point, it changes from a plus to a circle indicating it's going to close it. Now I can just click, and it should close. Oh, I need to now reselect that point and now close it. Because I'd been clicking around, I lost that selection. So all right, we got a little bit of messiness going on there. Let's just back it up a little bit. Going to hide the previous one so it's not in the way anymore. So this point right here is my current active point. So now if I click and drag, it's connected to it. Move to the finish, click and drag, and now it's connected and closed. So undo is your friend when you are trying to fix some of these things and align it. So now, as you can see, hand drawing this particular shape was easier than using the auto. Now I know if I select this hand and do the 10 points, it's the same as the other one. We zoom way in. I can now take that point, pull that point over to here, grab that, try and grab that handle. There we go. And some of these are really, there we go. Now we got it grabbed. So we have that grabbed. We can pull this over, pull that back. Don't add to it by clicking off because we're just trying to clean up our rig. We're not trying to add to the rig because we already have all the points that we want. So it's just a matter of moving those points around on our thumb to ultimately get what we want. Pull that in, shorten that up, pull it out so it's again lined up. The time you spend doing this in the beginning is going to be time that you will appreciate when you start trying to animate with it. Now we just want 8, not 10. So again, these are fairly simple body forms, so the create envelope is working pretty slick. So I'm not going to right now, but ideally I would have that point either at the bottom of the knee or up at the hip. We do want to 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so we are going to put it up at that point there, put this point over here. We can leave that one where it is, and then that's going to give us ideally the best control. So when we're doing the 8 the point, we have the 2 at the ends, 2 at the very points, and then we have ones that are generally in approximate middle sections of the contour, because that allows us to very quickly and easily, when we go to animate, I can just grab that point and move that body part pretty readily. So that can be a recommended way of accomplishing that. Okay, so now we have that done. Just 2 more parts to go. Create envelope. And again, once more, I'm going to just pull this one down. All right, so we're short on this side over here, so we'll pull that. Around, pull this one over, rotate it, pull this up, shorten the handle, change the angle, pull that point out, reduce that a little bit, pull this in on the shin. So what this is doing is this is giving us a nice option when we want to animate the shape of the calf of the lower leg by having these points. And this is where, again, if that's buried in the ankle, that would be more ideal, but we'll leave it. But we can compare it so it's different than this one. We're going to have a little bit less control because we only have the 4 points. So that makes that a little bit trickier to try and animate. But it really is having the ideal number of handles is something that just takes some time to figure out what is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm counting 7 on there. Actually, we'll just draw it. So what we're going to do is hide all existing deformers, and I'm going to click and drag back to that origin point, click and drag, 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 and then Alt Option to close. Notice the cursor changing to that smaller circle. Now we can just simply start adjusting some of these corners. So I can pull this out, lining it up a little bit better, hold down Alt or Option to turn it from a smooth to a corner point. Same thing here, pull that point down, take this point, pull it up and over, and now hold down Alt or Option, because those are really both kind of corners. Pull this out and up a little bit, change that shape out, and now we've followed it. So we've added deformers to everything except the facial features. We're not going to have deformers on those. Again, we're keeping it simple. We'll just select and squish them or make some drawing substitutions as necessary. So we're done with the envelope creator because I don't really see that as an option for working on the hair. So with the hair, I'm going to just start out and we will put an origin point right here. I'll just do a click with it. So now I'll click and pull back, click and pull back, click and pull back, click and pull back. Oh, pull back, not forward. Click and pull back. Click and pull back. So it's just this kind of clicking and pulling back to the previous point. As you can see, we're going to have to do some adjustments to line things up. And now we're back to the origin, so hold down. Okay, oh, great. All of that joined the foot. So let's do some undo. And deselect so nothing is active. So currently the foot is the active shape right now, so I did not select the hair. There. Now the hair is the active layer. Let's try all of that again. So I can click and drag, 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 click and drag. And while I'm doing this, if I make sure that my handles are big enough, it's going to make my job a little bit easier when I now adjust things. So now we'll be doing a lot of holding down of Alt, so I can adjust curvatures on these. Probably, ideally should have had a few extra points, but oh, don't want to do that. But we'll get it reasonably close to what we are trying to do. And sometimes you have to adjust the curve, move the point, and then adjust the curve again, especially in something like this where I have such large line length or stroke size. It's a little bit tricky getting everything to perfectly adhere and align to each other. But it's turning out not too bad. Done worse. But on some of these it probably would have been beneficial where they're compound curving, creating more of an S, to have an additional point to control it. And what would make this whole thing even better is if my character, if I had broken the hair into additional pieces. So we have front hair, back hair. That would certainly help on things when we are trying to animate it. That would make everybody's life a little bit easier. But we have a deformer on here which is going to give us some latitude while we are working. With the deformers created, what we're going to do is just take a look at the nodes and see how it's now added these in. So deformers, if we look at them, we can see like the hair, we had lots and lots of curves. If we look at the head, we have fewer curves, so then that was where we had 8. If I go into here, we have the body part. Now we can pull these down, so we have the different deformers there. So if I look at the neck, we can see then that was our 4 curves that we put into it. So they're there. It's now just really a matter of adjusting these parts, move them down. So it's not a bad idea to go and check out and clean up your node layout to make sure everything is indeed where you want it to be, so that you don't have any surprises going forward. So you should be able to go into that node structure and see that everything is indeed where you want it. So if you realize one of your parts doesn't have appropriate deform and you thought you put it on it. It could mean you had a mistake, like when I started working on the hair and the hair was connecting itself to the foot, which that would be problematic. So we don't want things like that to happen and surprise us down the road. So that's what it's created for different nodes. We're on frame 1. But before we can do any animation, this is going to be really, really important. And just extend that way out. If I look, I had inserted a keyframe on everything. Now if I start trying to align things and change my deformers and do everything else, turns out those deformers don't have a keyframe yet. So then if I move to frame 2 and start using the deformer to adjust things, what's going to happen is the change I make in frame 2 will show up in frame 1. And that's problematic. So it's really, really important, after we've added all of these deformers, after everything has been set, I collapse, click on my frame, hit the keyframe button or function key F6. So now if I look at the deform for the neck, we can see that yes, there is keyframes on all of these. So now it will remember this neutral starting position for my front view. So then when I want to move to my next frame and I hit keyframe, so that I can start rotating my character. So as I try to create a 3/4 view with this character, this is where it's imperative that I've added that keyframe information on everything on frame 1. So I'm just going to turn on tool properties so we can see what's going on there. We can now grab our transform tool as we want to start animating. So to show our deformers, we click on our 2 show deformer options. To hide them, I just click off. So if I click on a particular layer, you can see showing controls doesn't pull that up there. But if I, with that layer selected, hit show controls. So now if I highlight my whole, click on my whole character and choose show all deformers, it lights up like a Christmas tree here. We can see all of these lights or handles that are showing up for it. Now again, click on the hide controls and it goes away. Remember, with my animation tool, I do have it selected to select controls, so that if, as I am animating, so if I take this short here, pull up on that. Now I move into frame 2. Oh, don't want to do that. Hit escape on the keyboard. Now I can click on that frame. I can move and adjust this over. So, okay, I messed up the short. And go, okay, there's frame 1, there's frame 2. Whoops, I really don't like that. So I can hit escape. And now with my transform tool, with selecting control selected, I can just highlight those 2 and click the reset button here. So that resets the current keyframe back to its resting position. So that's the terminology that's used in Harmony, is our original position for a deformer before any keyframe information has been applied to it is the resting position. So that's how we're going to work with that. Now I'm just going to zoom out here a little bit and decide it's time to start transforming and animating my character. So I'm going from a front view to my 3/4 view. Now one thing I could do is with this I could set up the foot to do where I modify lots of shapes, but turns out the foot, if we remember, does have a drawing substitution, so I can now just swap that. So we can see, okay, the foot swapped there. Now one thing that's going to happen with this is if I select this, and let's hide deformer, we don't need that. It's best to position all of your pieces and then go back after you have everything roughly positioned, and then start modifying your deformers to position them how you want them to be. So I'm just going to hit B to select the whole leg, and I am going to shift the leg over here and down just a little bit. Now we'll notice the leg is going behind, part of it is going behind the front leg, so that short is in front. So we do need to nudge this whole group, so we can hold down Alt or Option and use the down arrow to pull it so it's now in front. Now if I click off and grab the back leg here, select B, 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 select the whole thing. Now this time I'm going to take this leg and bring it over here just a little bit. And what I want to do is just to do a tiny little scale change. So I'm going to hold down Shift and scale this leg a little bit because it's going to go behind, and now we'll just pull it so we mostly stay on the ground. Now if I toggle my frames, we see how we're starting to turn our position. Now it doesn't make sense when I look at this for the short to be underneath, so we're going to have to, that's where we can use our deformer, or maybe we don't need the deformer, we can just click on the short and grab its peg and pull that up. And now maybe on this one I'm going to pull this down a little bit. What I am going to do now is modify the hips a little bit. So with the hips selected, and just to show how we will start working with the deformer, we'll zoom in a little bit. And I want, as the character is turning, I'm going to hit escape so it's not selected, so I can now grab that point there. I'm going to pull that over, going to pull this out. So what we're seeing is a little bit of curvature of the buttocks happening here. So we see the glutes starting to stick out. And then we can return the crotch to where it needs to be. So this character doesn't skip leg day. So we're going to put some of that into it. But now on this side, I want to pull that in, and narrow it down. It also shows me that I want to adjust this. Now, one thing is when we do little changes, we don't see a lot happen to our line, but if I do a big change, we see a bigger change to the line. This is one of the reasons why using real skinny lines, it's not as apparent when that happens. But this also means then if I use a deformer, I get less effect on my line. So now I can pull this in here. Whoop. Click off it. Now pull that point in. It's really easy when we are working with deformers. We show the deformer, we get it to come up, and then we forget to adjust or deselect the artwork so that we are able to select the deformer point. And now turn off deformer. So now if I toggle between my two frames, we can see how our character is starting to turn. And if I take that frame, again, make sure we have an F6 on it. If I stretch that out and I tween it, we can see how it really does start to adjust. Now what we probably are going to need, if I want this to be a longer tween, is I will need to adjust the foot and come up with an intermediary foot. But right now we're looking for clean swap. So when we start doing our turnaround, we start out just with working on from one frame to the next. So we keep them back to back, so it's really easy to just use comma and period to toggle through those. Now click off the character. We're going to do a little bit of work on the upper body here. So with that, I'm going to take this arm here, select that, B, 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 and we'll move this, and we can see that arm needs to move behind. I'm also going to rotate it down a little bit. So yeah, it really needs to move behind because we've got some weird stuff going on there. And that's easy enough. Alt or Option and back arrow, we've nudged it behind. Maybe I don't want to rotate quite that far down on the 3/4 view, and I'm going to just even just put a little bend. So again, when we go to our views, we can see that happening. Now let's go BBB, and we'll pull this arm in front. And this one has more nudging issues, so we'll just pull that again in front. And with this hand here, I am going to just adjust that hand. Whoop, we don't want to tween it that way. Now I can go to the peg of that. So one thing you'll notice is when I click on it, I've selected the artwork. So let's just go and look at, so the hand is selected. So now if I hit B, trying to get to its peg, it actually selects the deform. That's why suddenly we see nothing show up. If I hit B again, now I'm on the peg. So you may wish when you're working to set it up so that your initial posing, you're using peg selection mode, then you turn that off so you can click on artwork and do flips, and to then pull up deforms and things like that. All right, so now this whole arm, I think I want to pull that down a little bit, and just to continue with what we're doing here with the artwork selected, we'll show our deformer for it, hit escape, and now I can click on my controls, and we're going to rotate, so, or not rotate, but adjust some of these curves a little bit, pulling them in, because as the body is turning into this 3/4 view, it's going to get a little bit skinnier. So I'm just adjusting some of the items. You're also going to realize, like, this is why characters often have a belt or something that sits between the shirt and the pants, or shirt and shorts, so that it can animate independently and kind of cover any discrepancies when we move pieces around. But now again, we can see how the character is starting to turn. I just want to put a little softening so we have a little bend happening. I think that's a little more than I want right there. We'll just pull that down. There. Got to pull these down. I'm going to let that one stay high, pull this one down a little bit. I'm just looking at, trying to picture how I want that to move. Now with the neck, I'm going to rotate that down, slide that back ever so slightly. Didn't mean to go down with it. Okay. I like that. Now, what I want to do is adjust the head. So I can just click on the face, B, B, B. That now selects the whole head. So we're moving that over. Now select, first I'm going to just compress the face a little bit. Slide the face over for the 3/4 view. And now that I've done that, I'm going to select the head, pull up a deformer for it, and this is where having this, this can be, having that point right here allows me to start to create the chin. I think I'm going to have to adjust where I put the face a little bit. I don't want the chin quite that prominent. And narrow that down. So if we have the mouth here, I'm going to take the nose, we'll pull that over. That just reveals to me that I realized when I set up the face got a little problem here. I have the nose should be, I mean, I can nudge it, but the nose should be between the eyes, so right now I guess I'll just nudge it forward so it's sitting on top of that eye, so it's cutting that eye. Might even be nice to have a drawing substitution for a profile nose that does have a line, so we might want to create something like that. And with the mouth, I want to shrink that down just a little bit more. Oh. So now we have our character moving. We don't have the hair moving yet. We're not going to worry too much about that yet, but I think we can shrink it a little bit. Probably, ideally, we would have the hair set up so we would have some bangs, and then we would have hair that extends behind the head and in front of the head, so it's in pieces. That does make our job easier. But you see how we're now able to get our character is turning. This leg, I think I want it a little closer to the ground. Okay, so now if we extend that frame out, see, I haven't even done any deforms on the arms and legs yet, but this is where I would want to start to put those in. So we can just pull that back again. So if I go to this view here, as I'm going to a little bit more of a side view, now I'll pull up that deformer, and I'm going to stretch that one out, pull that up. I'm trying to get so we have a little bit more kind of calf showing. So we're here, there. Now this one, the deformer for that. And knowing it is the side view, this one also should. So the reason, I am trying both methods of 4 points, 8 points, is to kind of get a sense of what is or is not going to be ideal or working for my character. Now, if I start to get weird puckers or shapes, I realize, we'll have to clean that up. Now, if we take this and just deactivate it, we can see that is the shape that I now have for that. So now we have our two objects, maybe this one. Maybe I pull that a little bit in. Again, the different, whether it's a 4 or an 8 point, is going to have a pretty big effect on how these work. But if I animate, we can see my leg looks okay. But they do look a little bit different because I have different controls that I am working with. I'm going to just take the shorts here, pull up my deformer, undo that, click off. Now I will grab that deformer, pull that down a little bit, and we'll just even round that out. Grab this one, put on the deformer. Let's put a little bit of rounding in on it. So hopefully you're starting to see some of the options here, the magic that we're able to create with this as we start to build out our turnaround character rig.